Beautiful. So here, the biggest mistake most players make at tryouts and how to avoid it. The biggest mistake most players make at tryouts and how to avoid it. And so, Matt, I'm coming back over to you first to talk about this mistake. And then Rudy will go similar format. We'll get into a conversation right after that. Matt, what is the mistake? How do we avoid this thing?
Kyle, this is tough because the biggest mistake that I see at tryouts is also something that coaches typically value the most. And the largest mistake I see at tryouts are players who try to shoot and score every time they touch the basketball.
Yeah.
Now, coaches value that. It's hard to find playing time if you can't make an open shot, not down a catch and shoot jumper from the 2-point or 3-point line, whatever the case may be. But I think the key thing to go into practice and to tryouts with is the fact that your coach is looking to build a team.
Yeah.
And this team of 10 to 12, maybe 15 players, whatever it is, there's different tools and skill sets that coaches need to be successful. Every player is not going to average 20 points a night. That's not physically doable in a 32-minute high school game or even in a 40-minute college game. And so athletes, when you go out there, it's you have to understand it's not just about can you score. Coaches are looking for 1 or 2 players probably to lead that on the team. And if that role's already filled, if you really care about making the team, you must find a different role that you can fill and stand out in that way during the tryouts.
Yeah, Rudy.
This should excite you. This should actually excite you. This could be a game changer because everybody else in your tryout is going to go out there and jack shots, take bad shots. They're going to go out there and try to shoot everything.
Yeah.
And you know what they're not going to do? Box out every time a shot goes up. Relentlessly pursue a rebound. Like, make a shot and point at the passer and say, great pass. Like, all those little things, y'all have to understand, like, everybody here on this call, please listen to this. Your coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, doesn't matter. Coaches are corny. They're some of the corniest people on the planet. They love the one-liners, the quotes. They sit there and they just read quotes. They eat quotes for breakfast. They love all the things that everybody talks about, the cliches. They love that stuff. They want the kid to go out there and dive on the floor for the loose ball. They will talk about that in the room after practice. Like, they'll go to their office and be like, man, that one kid, their shot looked like it was a little broke. They might not have hit a lot of shots, but they dove 3 times on the floor for that loose ball. I love that kid. Like, you stand out because while everybody else is trying to do this thing, there are so many other things in basketball that you could do to stand out, and nobody's trying to do them. So you should actually see that as an opportunity where everybody else is over here, focused at the plethora of things over here. And that's where your ticket is, because you're going to stand out so high since everybody else's focus there is going to be so low.
Yeah. Hey, this is inspiring me to go off script a little bit here. We might even go into some of our upcoming slides, but it's fine. All right. It's straight value. So let's do this. We can't say defense because we are going to talk more specifically about how to do that in the next upcoming slides. Spoiler alert. But let's brainstorm a quick list of all the things that they can do at tryouts. I'm going to type here as we go through it into the chat box. In fact, let's actually do this. Let's go to the chat box, everybody, before we even come up with our list. Everybody go to the chat box. You can say defense, it's fine. Everything that you think a coach might value at tryouts that has nothing to do with scoring. We're going 30 seconds. Go to the chat box, write it down. Oh man, they're coming in. I'm gonna even start reading some of these. Penny said hustle. Kylie, great name. That's what they used to call me when I was in preschool. Hustling. Jackson, talking on defense. Gianni, talking. Ray, hustle all the time. Communication. We're seeing hustles all over the place. Being vocal, Kristen, really nice. Magnolia said attitude, energy, defense, communication, showing up on time. IQ, passing, rebounding, defensive hustle, court vision, intangibles, rebounding, communication. I'm riffing. It's like, and Matt and Rudy, it's interesting because some of the stuff we're sharing, I'd say most players inherently know, or players inherently know, but it's, and maybe we should talk about this for a moment. Why is it so distracting? I mean, maybe it's just a belief system that's been ingrained in our brains that we think coaches only care about scoring. When in reality, we're talking about it right here. They don't only care about scoring. Obviously, if you're going to be a 20, 25 point scorer, you're probably making the team. right? There's no question about it. There's more roles than that. So Matt, back over to you for a moment on this topic. Let me just go into the head of a coach. How let's get really real, Matt. How much do you really care about all the stuff that people are putting in the chat box?
Oh, that's a great question. I cannot wait to answer because I think some people might be surprised by my answer. But first, we're gonna have a little. We're gonna keep everybody in suspense on that. Kyle, will you give us a reminder about where we should be dropping our comments to? Because I see a lot of great comments in the chat box that are only showing up for the host and panelists.
Yeah, reminder.
I'll make sure everybody gets a benefit.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that, Matt. You can go when you're at the chat box. It says to, and there's I think on everybody's screen listening and watching at home. It says to panelists or to panelists and attendees. You can actually select a drop down and click panelists and attendees so everybody sees your comments. And then also in addition, if you do have questions, please go to the Q&A instead of in the chat box, because you're going to see here there's a lot of people typing. Things are going to get buried. We'll answer questions at the end. So panelists and attendees is who you want to be typing to. Matt, back to you.
Love it. Well, first of all, I'm going to celebrate my guy Bryce on here, dropping in the Magic Johnson effect. Man, must be a Playmaker College or Point Guard College grad. I love that. Yes, coaches love the Magic Johnson effect. Kyle, to get back to your question, I'm going to say this. As I'm scrolling through the chat box, a lot of really solid answers in here, and also a lot of things, like you said, that we hear all the time, right? Communicate, hustle, rebound. The more general your answer, the less a coach cares. Like, what is hustle? Like, that's a very broad term. What is communication? That's a very broad term. But we got a couple, like Steve dropped in here. Body language. Okay, great. And then go deeper. Like, what is that to you? And that's no judgment on the answers, right? But that's just like into the head of a coach. What is the specific thing? Like, at the end of a tryout, right? Like, just like Rudy mentioned, when I'm back in my office with my assistant coaches, can I specifically say one thing that you did better than anybody else in the gym? Like Todd Martinez, you dropped in here, taking charges.
Yeah.
The part of your list. Like, that's a specific thing that you can stand out for. Now, again, does your coach value it? Well, you're going to know because you're going to have that conversation in his or her office. But the more specific you can. So if I'm going to begin to make a list of things that stand out, when I think about communication, is specific communication. And again, any communication is better than none. But I believe that you can begin to level up by even simply communicating geographically where you are on the floor. You know, I've got you help in the corner, right? I've got the paint, helps in the paint if you're on defense, or if a teammate's attacking and you're off the ball. I'm sliding to the right wing. I'm sliding to the right wing. So like, specific communication is going to get you a lot farther than ball, help, deny, because most players don't do that.
Yeah, Rudy, I have a thought to add to Matt before I do. What's on? You go ahead. Okay. I think if I was gonna, and we're actually gonna go on into one of those very specific things you can do in our next slide here in a moment. But one thing I want to hit on that you brought up, Matt, about points, you talked about, Rudy, is when a player goes into a tryout and thinks that they only have to score, they end up putting a lot of pressure on themselves, right? And then they end up pressing a bit and probably doing more than they have to do. And so I think one thing to know is you don't, number one, have to do something every single time down the court. If you don't score in that possession, it's fine, right? There's more flow to the game. And so I think what we're trying to get at here is to understand, one, points are not the only thing that matters. Then two, doing some of these little things are actually really these big things, and you can alleviate pressure from yourself. And then because it starts mounting, right? You don't score down this trip, then the next time something happens and you don't get a chance to score again, you don't get a chance to score again. All of a sudden you're 6 possessions in, and you think that on the 7th possession you have to score, and then you shoot a fadeaway out of bounds, and that actually only makes you look worse to a coach because they're like, oh, they don't get it. Rudy, you're nodding your head. Thoughts?
Yeah, that was going to be one piece just with the shooting thing that I've seen players do. And so the AAU program that I help run here, we have 19 teams. We had 196 athletes play for us this spring. So it's a lot of kids. I saw a lot of tryouts. As a player, one thing that you want to do when you go into a tryout is hide your weaknesses. You don't want to showcase the things that you can't do well. So going out there and trying to force shots, you do that, and eventually you're going to end up taking shots that you're not good at. That's not going to get you exposure to your coach. That's going to get you exposed. Like, your training time is where you work on your non-dominant hand. You work on the floater if you don't have it, or your jump shot if you're not that good at it yet. But when it comes to game time, competing, like, coach, I'm trying to show you what value I add to your program. That is not the time to go off the reservation and start trying things out. That is where you stick to the script. You do what you're really, really good at. And you say, hey, coach, I might have some other deficiencies. We'll work on that. But here's what I'm really good at. I can do these 3 or 4 things really, really well. And that's how you create an identity as a player. Players that don't have identities at the end of a tryout don't make teams.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're the best at this 1, 2, 3 things, that's going to stick out to a coach when they're thinking about who they have that can rebound, who they have that can set screens, who they have that can run the floor and get those easy buckets in transition. If you're the number 1 of 50 in any of those things, even if you're number 23, 24 and something else, it doesn't matter. You're at the front of the list in something that they're looking for. And so, you know, we talk about PGC, aim small, miss small. Figure out what you're really good at, find your strengths and try to showcase those. Don't go out there and just try to jack up shots because you think you have to score. That actually makes you look worse in the long run. So hide your weaknesses, showcase your strengths.
Cool. So let's keep building on this topic. I'm gonna, just for us, Rudy and Matt, I'm gonna slightly pull an audible. We have another slide here, and I'm gonna share it out loud here. It's control the controllables. If you're taking notes, it's control the controllables, and that's a summary a bit of what we had just talked about. I think you know, it's not just about points. We can control the controllables, but let me get really specific. And first, I'm going to tell you a story. Bob Huggins and Rudy, I'm forgetting his name for the point guard for West Virginia, the defender, the crazy good defender from years ago. You remember it? What's his name? I'm forgetting. Do you remember? You're on mute right now, Rudy.
I'm actually blanking right now.
Okay.
Matt, do you have it? I'm blanking. It's ball head dude.
Javion Carter.
Javion Carter, yeah.
I think, is it Javion? Am I saying it right? Okay, so I heard this story. Bob Huggins told it a long time ago that he was out recruiting as coach was doing the summertime, and he was at an AAU game at 8 a.m. in the morning. And it was at one of those gyms that there was like a row of 8 to 10 courts, and he was all the way at one of the far end courts. And as he was sitting watching one of the players he was trying to recruit, a player caught his eye 8 courts over at 8 a.m. And so you might be thinking like, well, what did the player do that caught a coach's eye in a packed gym at 8 a.m.? And as Bob Huggins tells the story, he shares that Carter was picking up full court in an 8 a.m. AAU game. And so players have often come up to me and been like, well, what do you do to stand out at a tryout? And we're talking about a lot of those things. But I think one very specific thing is pick up on defense full court. Okay, so now some of you are like, well, I'm not fast. I'm going to get blown by. Okay, it's not necessarily about that. It's a mindset, right? So maybe you're not trying to steal full court, but you're communicating something to everybody in the gym that you're going to defend, that you're not going to back down, that you're different than everybody else, right? If a whole gym is full of white shirts and you're wearing an orange shirt, you immediately stand out. If a whole gym is full of players lackadaisically, that's a word I just made up, playing defense, right? And then all of a sudden you're playing full court and you're picking up full, or you're playing a half court game and you're picking up at the top, there's no question a coach will walk into his office or her office and they're looking at their list and they're thinking like, who stood out in this work? They're going to think of you. Even if you got blown by a couple of times, it's not the point, right? It's the mindset to go and do that. Matt, have you actually ever seen anybody do that? Have you ever coached anybody into that? It's kind of bold because you got to be in great shape and it's really hard and nobody almost ever does it. But I totally believe in this. In fact, I did it at a tryout that helped me make this AAU team when I played in the EYBL. But yeah, from your angle.
Yeah, I actually right now, Steph Okenge. He was one of the players that played for me. I didn't know him before he showed up, and he was going through what a lot of the players on this call are probably going through. He had a great offensive skill set, but 2 things. Yeah. Number one, he was the new guy on campus. He had never lived there before. He actually moved from Canada to the U.S. His sophomore year, and he was walking onto a team that had already had multiple 20-point per game scores returning from the year before. There were no extra shots to go around. And so he just bought into being the best defender. Could he score? Yes. But he knew that to really, like, number one, begin to build a relationship with his teammates, he had to do things they didn't do, and be able to make their load lighter, in things that they weren't as good at or gave much effort at. But the moment he came in, I noticed right from the start, every time we're in the gym, every open gym, Steph was intentionally guarding the best player on the team. Yeah. So even if it's not a full court situation, it's the fact that you're guarding the best player on the other team at all times. I think that's something that coaches value.
Like, people know who the best player is on the court, right? Like it's usually pretty obvious. And so very specifically, if you walk on the court, you'll be like, yo, I got Matt. That communicates something to your coach. All right, sorry, I cut you off, but I got excited about it.
No, I love it. No, even if someone else was already guarding that player, he'd walk over and say, no, that's mine. That's mine.
Yeah.
You know, and Kyle, going back, I mean, there's so many great examples of that. The first person that comes to mind to me is Gary Payton II.
Yeah.
Like he was not someone who was in the NBA for a while. Like he was in and out, G League, nothing. And then last year, when he was playing for the Warriors, he goes on this team that has all the great scoring in the world. They don't need him to score. And actually, again, basketball nerd, stat freak, at the end of the season, there's a top quadrant of players in the NBA. And when those players were on the floor, Gary Payton was guarding them 94% of the time when he was on the floor.
Yeah.
So 94 out of 100 possessions, he was guarding the other team's best player on the floor. That's no wonder he actually had playing time in the playoffs. No wonder he got the contract he got from Portland. Like he values something and is good at something that most players don't as much.
Yeah.
Kyle, one thing real quick, because I want to hear what Rudy has to add. While Rudy was sharing his last answer, I just began to quickly jot down specific things that I would value as a coach or other coaches would value when it comes to things in tryouts. And so here in a second, I'm just going to drop that in the chat box. This is not a list of priority, and this is by no means a complete list or even my top 10, but just off the top of my head. So Rudy, tell us what you have to add. I'm going to drop that in the chat box.
Man, this is just really good. You guys are doing such a great job right now. I don't want to kill the flow. I think the big thing that I just see right now is I was going through and looking through the chat box and just all the answers. Here's what I've noticed, and this is just, we talk about it at PGC sessions that I run all the time. Most of you know the answers to the question. Mm-hmm. Like you gave great answers. Everything that we've said pretty much, you've said in the chat. So I'll just give you this quote. We give it at a lot of PGC sessions, but I think for many of you that haven't been there, this will help. The greatest distance in the world is the distance between knowing and doing. Like the greatest distance in the world is the distance between knowing and doing. Many of you know the right answers, but then you go on court and you don't do the right things. You say the right things in an air-conditioned room when you're comfortable and the coach asks you a question, but when you get on court in the heat of battle, when you're tired, you know, if I ask you right now, should you run hard in every sprint or should you jog a sprint? Everybody would say, yeah, we should run it. But then you're mad because you just lost a game. And so you go out there and you jog. You know, you should touch every line, but some of you don't touch every line every time. Like there's hundreds of people on this call right now. I can guarantee you that some of you don't touch the line every time you. So like part of this is just checking your ego at the door, is checking your focus when you're going through the workout. And you got to decide like, how much does this really mean to me? Because it's easy to have the right answers in theory, but it's hard to have the right answers in practice. That takes discipline, that takes focus, that takes like a strong desire. And to be honest, if you haven't done those things, but you know those answers, you need to start to ask yourself the question, do you really want it that badly? If the answer is yes, then start closing that gap and start closing that distance. If it's not, then maybe go try out for soccer. But if you want this basketball thing and you're going for it, like you got to make the right decisions, not just have the right answers in an air-conditioned room.
Rudy, I've been writing some. I'm gonna go eat some quotes for breakfast tomorrow that you just spit out. I love quotes. Really, really nice. Thanks, appreciate you showing out some snaps. And Kylie, I also appreciate you. Javon Carter was the guy I was sharing earlier. Appreciate that. We're gonna move on here in a moment, but Matt, back to you to what you were gonna share.
Kyle, actually, I dropped it to you in the group chat. Thought that might be a little quicker. Just having issues getting in the chat box. But I see a couple people are asking for the quote that Rudy said and what Rudy shared, which is so good. The greatest distance in the world is the distance between knowing and doing. I know to be in better shape, I have to hit the weight room. I got to hit the weights. I got to stay off certain foods. But yet, do I actually choose to do those three things? I know it, but do I do it? The greatest distance in the world is the difference between knowing and doing.
Really good. Matt, do you want me to drop in what you're going to share next? Go ahead and hit enter.
Yeah, you can go and drop it in. This is just a list of things that I was coming up with off the top of my head that coaches are going to value in tryouts. Like the first thing is eye contact with players and with teammates and other coaches. You know, anytime anyone is talking to you or talking to somebody, making great eye contact. Another thing I would say is never walking on the court. If it's time to transition drill to drill, hey, Sometimes you just got to sprint for the heck of it, but at a minimum, move at a pace that's faster than a walk. Celebrating the success of other teammates. When coaches see that you value the success of other people over your own success, that's special. Looking and sounding urgent when you're waiting in line for your turn. Most players check out. Like they're not fully engaged in what's going on, especially the farther from the front they are. If you're fully engaged in what's going on, every moment of a drill and every moment you're waiting in line, that's going to stand out.
Yeah.
Making simple, boring, successful decision every single time. I think a lot of times players come in, at least my experience has been, Rudy, you can speak to this. They want to say highlight plays. Oh, I got to make a highlight play for coach to see it. I got to have that big alley-oop, that flashy pass. And no, like Coach REM at UConn said it best, like the best pass in the world is the one that's completed. And so making the right decision and valuing the individual decisions over the end result. Make the right pass, even if that player who's training with you right now isn't going to make the shot or might not catch it. Coaches are going to value making the right basketball decision over those things.